Let's speak to Elizabeth Lev. She's an art historian and she joins us now from Rome. Elizabeth, I want to start by getting your reaction rather, to the images of Notre Dame in flames.
Well, an art historian, your entire life is spent reading about beautiful things that existed and then they were destroyed. But you read about them with 100 years distance, and you never think you're going to watch something that you've grown up with, you've studied, you've known. It's one of the reasons why you decided to do what you do. You never think you're going to see it happen. So literally it was like watching it's like being torn apart. It was such a very moving
What is the historic loss here, and what can be salvaged from this realistically?
Well, what is the history lost here? I mean, you can frame the history in terms of the architecture. So you're talking about a 900-year-old building, which was, an avant-garde building in its time. You're talking about a building that has seen the history of France. It's seen the Revolution. It's seen weddings. It's seen Joan of Arc retried and acquitted on its doorsteps. In the history that church has seen, the faith of a nation, the faith this city, this church that was built for kings but ended up being for the people, this incredible body of faith, 900 years of prayer in there. I think actually Victor Hugo, who went to so much trouble to try to save that building in 1831, when he wrote The Hunchback of Notre-Dame, he was describing what the church was to Quasimodo, the famous bell ringer of the story. And he said the church was not only company for him, nay, it was more. It was nature itself. It was his universe. And I think in many ways that's what we've lost.
You put that, Elizabeth, so incredibly poetically. Not to detract from the history and the culture surrounding Notre Dame, but what are we talking here in terms of the monetary loss?
It is impossible. I really, people ask me this question about things like St. Peter's all the time. What would happen? It's such an impossible question to try to evaluate. I was hearing the number about the millions of dollars for the spire, but when you think about the works of art, which are in many cases irreplaceable, and the history and the structure, there's going to be a monetary value in what it's going to cost to put the beams up and to reconstruct the stones, but you're never going to be able to get those carvers back who first learned how to carve the stone and created these new images on those facades. So it's a number that we are going to discover, because this is a completely new situation.
After everything that you've described, Macron has vowed to rebuild. Can you really rebuild? Can you really replace this? Is it the same?
I am delighted to hear that from President Macron. It is exactly the right, it's the perfect spirit, is the spirit of the church and is the spirit of the French. That church has seen, it was gutted during the revolution. The statues of the kings out front were beheaded. The images were defaced. It was neglected for 30 years, to the point where it was about to fall down. Snipers shot through it in World War II. Fires have occurred in that church, not of this gravity, but fires have occurred in this church, and that church has continued to rebuild and to put itself back together. When Eugène Viollet-le-Duc had to rebuild that church in 1860, he had to do such extensive work that he actually had to rebuild the spire that we just saw crash into the building this evening. So that is a church, that is the spirit. The church will be rebuilt, and I'm sure the entire world will contribute to making sure it's rebuilt. And it will be a little bit of past and a little bit of present, but that's what these churches are. That's what the church is. It's something that's always going forward, and this horrible scar and this brutal mark of history will remain, but it doesn't mean that the story of Notre Dame is over.
And Elizabeth, before we go, why do you think Macron has made this? I think you touched on it a bit there, but why do you think Macron has made this an international operation? What do you think his thinking is there?
Well, it is in many ways an international operation. The entire world, what have we been hearing all day? How many people from all over the world, 14 million visitors last year, double the amount of the Eiffel Tower, people who like to sit in the cafe, people whose backdrops to their wedding proposals took place there. That church is not just the backdrop to the life of the Parisians, it's a backdrop to the life of the whole world. And it is to be expected that the whole world, everyone in the world who loves beauty, who loves culture, who loves history, who loves Paris, who loves the church, is going to do something to try to help, if only just to, as they did back when they first built that church, when the Parisians themselves carried the stones so that they could be carved. I think the entire world will rally round to make sure that Notre-Dame shines again.
All right, Elizabeth Lev, we appreciate your profound words, an incredible tribute to Notre Dame. Appreciate you being with us.